molecules are made up of atoms or elements that bond through the giving and receiving of valence electrons. This itself sounds like it could lead to a complicated thread of detailed explanations. But what people need to know is that there is an easier way to describe or provide more information about a molecule. This is called the Lewis dot structure. This was named after Gilbert N. Lewis in 1916. This structure makes use of the electron dot diagram and adding lines to show the chemical bonds between atoms. There are two types of bonds that the Lewis dot structure could illustrate. There's ionic and covalent. The first bond we're going to talk about is the ionic bond. Ionic bonds form strong interactions between ions through the transfer of one or more electrons. This is how it looks like on a Lewis dot structure. For example, let's take potassium bromide. First off, the thing you have to take note of in making this is that you must follow the octet rule, in which there should always be 8 valence electrons formed, in which the cation, a positively charged ion, gives a certain amount to the anion, a negatively charged ion. That makes it have 8 valence electrons. Back to potassium bromide. First, take the first ion of the molecule, which is potassium. Potassium contains 1 valence electron. Then, draw a dot or mark with a dot around the ion, indicating the number of valence electrons. This is the same for the second ion, bromine. Bromine contains 7 valence electrons, hence having 7 dots around it. Following the octet rule, the anion, bromine, should receive 1 more electron. This is where potassium comes in. In the structure, indicate the transfer of electron from the cation with an arrow to the empty spot of the anion to have a total of 8 valence electrons. Next, you indicate the number of electrons given and received using brackets. The symbols using positive and negative indicate the cation, which is in this case potassium, and the anion, which is bromine. The next bond is the covalent bond. Covalent bonds are formed by the sharing of electrons between atoms. On a Lewis dot structure, it looks a bit different compared to ionic bonds, though this starts off similar. Still, indicate the number of valence electrons of the atoms by marking with dots. But, instead of just the giving and receiving, covalent bonds indicate the sharing of electrons, allowing the atoms to stick together. So, in the structure, all of the atoms included form 8 valence electrons due to the sharing of the other atoms connected. For this example, phosphorus trichloride. Phosphorus contains 5 valence electrons, and chlorine contains 7 valence electrons. To complete each atom by forming the octet, connect these atoms with the use of lines indicating the bond connecting each atom, hence forming the octet. The Lewis dot structure is very useful in terms of describing or illustrating a molecule. This is for better understanding of how bonds work and how many bonds are actually in it. Compounds could now be described through this.